Welcome back to the Today Show. I'm your host, Christopher Power. Our guest today is Teal Scherer. Now, Teal, we were talking about your dancing career just before break here, but outside of dancing and acting, you're also an active rower on Seize the Oar. Is that right?
Yeah, so I moved to Seattle about 5 years ago, and after I moved here, I heard about an adaptive rowing team. They're called Seize the Oar, and yeah, they take people with disabilities out on the water to row, and we compete in different rowing competitions and do workouts once a week. And so they're just like a great organization that I was like felt so happy to get involved with right after moving here, because I met other people in the disability community, and just being active out in on the water like that is pretty cool.
So when we talk about disability and when we were talking about your education, about accessibility, when people talk about accessibility and inclusion,
Mhm.
what stands out to you?
I just feel like accessibility and inclusion, like it affects all of us. So we should all be invested in it. I mean, you don't know, like I said, I was injured when I was 14 years old. That's the last thing I expected to happen to me, but it did happen to me. So I think, just because you don't have a disability, that doesn't mean you won't have a disability at some point, especially if you
No.
live long enough, you probably will. And it doesn't mean your child or a family member or a dear friend won't become disabled. And so, like, why do we like shy away from it and create so much stigma around it, when instead I feel like everybody should be, working to make sure we live in an accessible world that is free of stigmas surrounding disability and that's inclusive.
It's interesting. I was talking with Chris and a few people earlier that we were kind of raised and ingrained not to ask these questions and to kind of, shy away. And it's just seemingly now that the world has changed to say, no, it's okay. We can talk about these things and we can talk about
Yeah.
them in a healthy, positive, and educational way.
Yeah.
So, on that note, like, what is something that we as society need to change our perception on?
I mean, yeah, and I mean, that's a good question. There's so many things. I mean, I think I've touched on some of them as far as it's just getting rid of those preconceived notions people have about disability, about that we can't live fulfilling, meaningful lives, that we can't contribute to society, that it's there's so many. I mean, ableism is real and thriving, and it's like just rethinking how you think
Hmm.
about about things and challenging yourself. If you see somebody with a disability out in public, don't turn your head. Or if your
Right.
kid comes up and asks somebody, with a disability, oh, what happened to you? Don't shush them. It's like it's all the things.
So you're a columnist at New Mobility. Is this kind of some of the stuff that you write about? Well, I mean, what is Nobility? How can people find more about
Yeah.
that, the
So
column and things?
New Mobility Magazine is the membership magazine of United Spinal Association. So New Mobility is a magazine it's like a lifestyle magazine for wheelchair users, and we cover everything from technology, health, adaptive sports, people in the media, everything, adaptive fashion, all the things. And yeah, I mean, so we write about so many things, from a disability perspective. And people can find us online at newmobility.com. Look up New Mobility Magazine. Yeah, and we're all on all the social media platforms. So yes, I'm their media columnist, and also sometimes write feature articles for them. And I host a online interview series called New Mobility Live, which is on Instagram Live.
So New Mobility Live on Instagram and newmobility.com for the
Yeah,
the column and stuff like that. That's really cool.
yeah, yeah,
It's interesting that you bring up fashion, New Mobility fashion. I mean, it's kind of a question I'm going to throw at you. What do you mean when we talk about new mobility fashion or mobility fashion?
Yeah, so yeah, it is fashion for people who use wheelchairs, like dressing, like what are the best kind of clothes to wear, what shoes are going to stay on our feet. There's a lot of different uh, you know uh, manufacturers now starting to make clothes for wheelchair users, like jeans that are easier to put on, easier to button. They don't have all the pockets and the stuff in the back, so you don't sit on it and get a pressure sore. So we're seeing improvement in the fashion industry when it comes to them thinking about adaptive clothes. And then it's also just tips for wheelchair users, like on clothes that maybe work better, or tips on how to do things. So it's yeah, it's an interesting topic that's actually pretty popular with our readers.
That's really cool, and it's just recently come up on our end. I'm like, wow, we don't really know a lot about this, so I'm happy that you mentioned that. So that, and
Yeah.
it's what's the site that they can go to check out the clothing part?
Yeah, it's the New Mobility website, and you can
Perfect.
just go to the search and just maybe type in fashion, adaptive fashion. And then we've done some really good articles on it. Yeah, and we're
Beautiful.
seeing manufacturers now starting to do like shoes that are easier to put on, like winter boots that have zippers on both sides, so you can more easily get your foot in them. And yeah.
That's cool. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but you're kind of a little bit of a geek at heart, and you had the opportunity to sit on a panel at Geek Girl Con.
Yeah, so I was introduced to that world through a web series I was in called The Guild, which Felicia Day created, and it's about a group of online gamers, and I came in I think it was season 3. I was on kind of like the main group of gamers. I was their one of their nemesises, and I was on this really cool gamer team with Will Wheaton was one of the actors. And yeah, it was so much fun. So that's how I was kind of brought into that wonderful world, was through that web series. And then from that have, yeah, been to a lot of different Comic Cons and Geek Girl Con and all the things, which is so much fun.
So what's the strangest question you typically get asked, or one that pops out of your mind that says, "Oh man, that was just really out of left field"?
Oh gosh. Well, okay. So just in general, as a wheelchair user, I get asked really, really, really weird questions. I tackle a lot of that in my web series, My Gimpy Life. Episode 3, which is called Inspirational, kind of opens with it. There's a cold open, which is like word for word happened to me in real life, which where it was I was leaving a Bank of America, and a guy just came up to me and was like, "Hey, can I ask you something?" And I was like, "Sure." And he was like, "Can you have sex?" And then when I was like, yeah," he was like, "Oh, cool. You want to go on a date sometime?" So yeah, so that's like the cold open of episode 3 of My Gimpy Life. And that's the thing. It's like people just don't know. So that
It's
was
more
the
of an
weirdest.
awkward laugh on my end than something funny, just to be fair.
It's hilarious and also awkward and cringy and not appropriate and all the things. But that's just an example of the stuff that, wheelchair users or people with disabilities deal with. And that's not uncommon to get asked that. I've heard that from my other friends who are wheelchair users who have gotten that same question, from strangers. Yeah.
That's weird and awkward.
Yeah, it is.
We're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hopefully, with more strange and awkward questions for you.